Do it backward. It's a nice sicha. It's not a hard sicha. It's a sweet, beautiful, beautiful word. Okay, we're starting from Tiv Gimel. Wegen Zweck von die Pomegranates ha Meil. Right, the Meil had bells and it had pomegranates. Right, so Rashi says there was a bell and next to it a pomegranate, and next to the pomegranate a bell, and next to the pomegranate a bell. Right, they were interspersed, intermittent. Some Rishonim hold that every single spot was a pomegranate with a bell inside. The Roya Rav came to the Rebbe and he told the Rebbe, the name of the Chassam Sofer, that there was a bell, and then a pomegranate with a bell inside, and then a bell without a pomegranate, and a bell. So the Rebbe said, das steht nicht in kein Ort, aber der Chassam Sofer gewesen a Bar Samches. In other words, Chassam Sofer is he's his own day. But the Ikka was that the Kohen Gadol wore bells that made noise, glekalach. They made noise. They had an inbel inside. They had a thing that made it ring. And the pasuk says, like the pasuk v'nishma kelei b'vei yala kedesh, you hear the Kohen Gadol walking. And if they feel is das negea in der Aveda von Kohen Gadol, this business that the bell, the glekalach made noise was so important. As durch dem v'nishma v'kelei wird ois gehit von layamas. That because the bells made noise, the Kohen Gadol didn't die. Was miklalavat hashamei hein, that if the bells would not have made noise, then Rachmana litzlan the Kohen Gadol would have died. So the noise of the bells of the Kohen Gadol were very important. It's a pasuk in Chumash.
So what made noise? He died.
The Kohen, because he was mechus begadim. Mechus begadim. He has the Kohen Gadol must have wash made begadim. If he's missing one of the begadim, it's chayiv misa. Even if he's wearing the Meil, but the Meil is missing the bells, for that alone is chayiv misa.
The bells are there, they don't make noise.
If the bells are there, they're going to make noise. If they're not making noise, there's something wrong with them. Darf man verstehen, the question is, was is v'nishma, dem klingen von die Parmenim, why is it that important? The dafka, when it's going into the kodesh, the bells have to make noise. You can make a contrary argument. The pasuk says, leiberash havaya, nor bekeld mamadake. The pasuk says in Tanakh, right, that the Eibush, there's a lot of tumul. The tumul is malachim, the tumul is, as they say in Yiddish, the hoo-ha. The Eibush is quiescence, quiet. So why does the Kohen Gadol have to have tumul the bells? Uvi mezetes beim Kohen Gadol gufa, the Kohen Gadol himself. As I knisa lifnai v'lifnim b'yom Kippur, when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Holy of Holies Yom Kippur, is given dafke on the big day Zohar. We didn't have the golden kelim. Ubemela on the Meil, with them kelim apamenim. So Yom Kippur, faket, the Kohen Gadol was not allowed to wear the big day Zohar that made noise when it came to Shakadosh. So why is it a priority that has to be tumul? What's the Rebbe's cash? Tumul is chitonius, is klippe. Kedusha is bittul, quiet. Now the Ramban is masbid. The Ramban explains, as haba beheichel melech pisim chayiv misa. You're not allowed to walk into a king's chambers without giving the king notice. And if you come suddenly, you're chayiv misa. Und der Kela Parmenim is azoivi anatilas. The bells ringing before you walk in is announcing yourself and getting permission to go in. Reinzugehen und dann die Aveda, enter in and do the Aveda. Skip the bracket. Not even, okay, point well taken.
No, but it's not going past the Kedesh.
Right, going to the okay. Lay down Peter's kumteres. Now, he wore it when the Aveda's chutz, not the Aveda's pnim. So you could say the Kohen Gadol did it for all the Kohenim. The Kohen Gadol every day would announce for all the Kohenim, ready or not, we're coming in. Skip the bracket. Lay down Peter's kumteres. If you follow the Ramban, it comes out as the v'nishma keli fun de pa'amenim, the noise of the bells is nitken chelik fun der avodah. It's not a part of the work itself. Nor blaze a hagdoma v'achana tzu der avodah. Before you do the avodah, you have to make a preparation. You have to make an introduction. You have to announce to yourself, "I'm coming in." In other words, the Rebbe is bothered by the Ramban's pshat. Because according to Ramban's pshat, the bell is simply an announcement. Miklinkt. You're announcing yourself. Like, you know, when you go to the oil, before you walk in, you knock on the door. It's an the Rebbe did it. So this is the same part as the Ramban. You want to, before you walk in, it's the Tilas Rishus.
Excuse me, when I saw this by my family, we go over to the Matzeva, we knock on it. Where's the car?
From your family. Beferish. I don't know what the market is. We get to the Klappentir. And I think when the Rebbe went to feed the Rebbe's Cheder also, in 770, Even after Yutva, it felt like clapped on in tears. Now, Vibal, Dober as yet the Prat Beshayches, the Aveda from King Godless B'Tachas Adiok. But the Ramban's Pshat, the Rebbe is not saying the Ramban is wrong, but the Ramban Vimizok is not enough. Since we know, B'chlal, everything in Torah, and specifically everything about the King Godl and his Aveda is precise, absolutely. Ubemikosh Kein Azah. Was is verbunden mit einer Schmitzerkanal, particularly in Avodah, that if he Chas v'Shalom misses it, he loses his life. Und die Pamoinim haben Mashmiya, Kel given Eich B'Shas Avodah Guf, and the bells were ringing. Not just before he went in, but while he was doing the Avodah. So the Rebbe doesn't want to say that Ramban is wrong, the Rebbe wants to say maybe there's another Pshat, right? Turn the page. Mistaber, it's reasonable to presume, as v'nishba koile is an Indian versus Negeya, der Avodah Guf. The bells being sounded is not only like the Ramban says, that it's an announcement before you enter, but it's negating the avoid itself. So the Rebbe says, I want another pshat. I want another Rashi. I'm not saying that Ramban is wrong, but I'm saying there's got to be more to it than what the Ramban is saying. There has to be something about the bells which is connected not just to announcing yourself that you're going to do the avodah. There has to be something about the bells which is actually the avodah itself. And the Rebbe says an incredibly sweet thing. Mamish. Shmuel would not only say that the label of the Sichos is sweet, he would say the Sichos itself is sweet. Let's go. Dalet. Einif and the Biyunim and them is one of the answers is this. Head. The King Godel getoins an Aveda al Shliach from Klal Yisrael. The King Godel represented all the Jewish people. Und das meint b'meile, means automatically, as bevoyai. In Zayin Arayin in Kodesh. This means that when the King Godel went to the holies, Nemter mit sich Arayin, he carries with him dem ganzen Klal Yisrael la Kodesh, the entire community didn't enter the holiness. This is the letter from the Rebbe. There was a young man, a shliach, the erste Jahr in Mamish, who wanted to go to college. And he wanted to go to college because he felt it'll help the shlichus. He'll learn how to write better, he'll learn how to speak better. And the letters of Nikas Kedesh, Rebbe Shar for B'nivin. He says, you're a shliach of the Rebbe the Nasi Ador. And if you're going to go to college, you're schlepping the Rebbe with you to learn Chochmas HaKollege. And the Rebbe said, it doesn't matter whether you even if you say, I don't want to be, I'll be mevater on the shlichus so that I can go, you should know you're gebunden mit dem Rebbe schwer and you can't do anything about it. Wherever you're going to go, you're taking him with you. So the Kohen Gadol comes into the Beis HaMikdash, he's carrying all Yid. Now listen to this. Es verstandig und erklärt, bekam makemes baruch. This is self-understood. And it's also explained in places. It's the following. As the Aveda from Balei Tshuva, the avodah of a Baal Tshuva, of course, in contrast to the avodah of a tzaddik. Was is mitzad harichuk? A Baal Tshuva is not running to Hashem. A tzaddik is running to Hashem. A Baal Tshuva is running away from Avedis, and Antleit for Ra is running away from Ra, is mitarash. It's with a tumult. As if he ain't was Antleit for Sakanas Mavis, like one who's running away from death, mit Gishrei and Shturim, with noise and tumult. Meaning, it says in Chassidus, a tzaddik's avodah higher than seichel is called Re'usa de Liba, which is quiet. Kada b'chashoya Re'usa de Liba. It's the first page in the Samach. The Baal Tshuva, he makes a tumult. Now, why is the tzaddik quiet and the Baal Tshuva tumultic? The teretz is because it's like the story with the oyster. You know, when you have a piece of dust in the oyster, so it produces a pearl. People who have inside of themselves Ra, and they need to overcome that Ra, have to compensate for the Ra, and the way they compensate for the Ra is by making tumult. Now, if you have no Averis, if you're a perfect person, everything you do is quiet and deep, fluid. But if inside of you there's some kind of a chesaron, that chesaron you have to overcome it. And because the chesaron has to overcome, it makes tumult. But kids and it's tzaddikim can do very high avodah, still at hate, because they're fluid, they're one with the avodah. When Balei Tshuva do a similar avodah to the tzaddik, because inside themselves there's Ra, they have to fight against the Ra inside of themselves, so it comes out noisy. You understand? The Baal Tshuva, the tzaddik has no friction. It's still. The Baal Tshuva has inner friction, so overcoming the friction creates noise. So the Rebbe says the Kohen Gadol is carrying tzaddikim, and he's also carrying Balei Tshuva. What's the difference practically, actionally? The tzaddikim do their avodah quiet, and the Baal Tshuva do their avodah loud. Let's continue to read. Ve'al derech zeh is in dem sug avodah von jeden Yid. It's the truly of every Jew. Afilu von dem was hat nit kein avedas. Rachmana l'tan has no avedas at all. B'shas tracht sich herein, when a person thinks V'azeh is rachak from the Elokus, he's far away from the Eibishter. See, the far but the Nefesh HaBahamis is not by him betalk for either because his Nefesh HaBahamis is in full force. He's a tzaddik, he's a beinani. Meil is a yesh, v'davar nifred. From the Elokus, he's entered Yantem Safsaf from the Elokus, or that I feel from the Tev, or he knows what good is, but because he knows what good is, he hates the fact that he's in a bad place. Nefesh Elokis, taka b'tam mitzias de kedusha, aber farta mitzias nid bittel. Verter nis ere mit a kel rash gadol. He's awakened with a very tumultic voice to antleifen from them matzav to run away from that condition. So the Rebbe says, even a beinani, not a Baal Tshuva, when a beinani thinks that inside of him is ra, he creates a tumultic avodah. Now this bracket we're going to read. But the frag van Baal Shem Tov. Wegen dem, listen to this is meidendik. Was Chsidim machen tnues v'chulu b'am daven. The Baal Shem Tov was asked. The Chassidim make funny faces when they daven. They grimace, they make funny faces. And the Misnagdim was screaming that this funny faces, there's a simon that Pashat Mishagoyim. Nicht kein normaler Mensch. Hat geentfert. The Baal Shem Tov.
We probably think the same thing.
What about Chassidim?
Making funny faces during davening.
That's why in the shul you're not supposed to have any mirrors. Hat geentfert. So the Baal Shem Tov answered. Listen to this. Das ist bedugma wie einer was trinkt sich in Yam. A person is drowning. Macht alle erletunu es efrate von sich. He makes all kinds of grimaces to save himself. Und schreit bechol keche and screams with his whole voice. Amen soll ihm should save himself. Und sicher lacht keiner nicht, and no one is going to make fun of thank you von seinen Tnuas und Gewalten, from his motions, from his grimaces, and from his noise. So far to Baal Shem Tov. Why do Chassidim make funny faces? Because when a Chassid is diving, it's like a person is drowning. People drowning, they do things that they're not thinking how they look. They're trying to save themselves. So the Rebbe says, this is a Taich Rash. It's not so efficient, it's not pretty, but it's lebedik. It's a sign of life. Says the Rebbe. Says Cain stated nicht zum Pasuk leberash havaya. It's not a contradiction to the pasuk that the Rebbe quoted before. That by the Eibishter is quiet, while the diak in them is leberash havaya. When you're holding by the madrega of Ein Safe, then everything is quiet. Kedei zu sein a kli zum shem havaya shalamayim min ha'elamis. You want to be a vessel of shem havaya. Darf der Aveda sein der Beginn, aber kelt man that can be very quiet. Betachas a bitl. Mashen ken wenn der Aveda is noch. When you're holding on a lower level, and it's verbunden mit that life for Yeshus and Metzias, you're still in a madrega where you're still a Yesh, and you're still a Metzias, and you're trying to get out of it. You're not reaching Shem Havaya. You're only reaching Shem Elikim. Was geht an Ort of Metzias? That gives room for your Metzias. Says the Rabbi, Dia Avodas kanaf verbunden dafke mit Rash. When you're in a lower level, you dafke make tumult. People who want a lower madrega, and they want to be pnimium, and they don't want to get excited because it's Polish, the rest. The Rebbe calls it Amalek. In my Morim of Zocher, the famous mind for the Rebbe Rashab from Sabachei, the Friedrich Peizayin, where there's different Amaleks. One of the Amalek is the Amalek who's an intelligent. We don't get excited with an Amalek. If you're a Pasha to Yid with a Yetzer Hara, you get excited because you're fighting with Yetzer Hara. Finished. So the Rebbe says, und das ist der Tam, was die Avoide von Kein Godel a ganz Jahr ist gewesen und einfach nicht mehr können. The Meil had bells, and the bells made noise, and they didn't make noise Yechayev Misa because the noise represented the Bailei Tshuva. I love to say this. I mamish love to say this. It says in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Yom Kippurim. That's basically by Kol Nidre they say heter to daven with sinners. Adas Hamokam, Adas Hakol, B'Shiva Shemad, Onomatir L'Pal Mavayonim. It says in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch that if you come to a shul and there's no Rasha, go to a different shul. You need to have a volunteer Rosh. You have to have one guy. Purim, you have to have a volunteer. Yom Kippur, you have a volunteer. One guy. There's no to show him. Daven dort nicht. The Kohen Gadol comes in. He's not making any noise. There's no Baal Tshuva attached to him. He's Chayev Mise. She has to bring into holiness. Euch die Yidden, such Jews. Was say that Aveda Knisa Lakedesh, their order of Aveda and entering the holiness is Bekel Rav. Wie says Oich Menumas in them, as it's hinted in the fact. Was die Pamoinim seinen given Bishuli HaMeil, why were they at the bottom of the Meil? Why not at the top? Push it. That Inyan for Vedishma Kelis verbunden mit die niederike Madreges von Yidden. It's talking about the lowest Jews who are in the madrega of shulayim, of the fringes, of the edges. Vazer aveidas mitzad arichot, they serve Hashem out of distance, and this is why the Kohen Gadol wears the bells and he wears dafka at the bottom. Und dabei is the hasara, the pasuk adds v'nishma kelei v'layomos. Dafka because the Kohen Gadol is wearing the bells and they're making noise, that's why he doesn't die. As in them is tolud the klos hachayes for Kohen Gadol. The life of the Kohen Gadol depends on carrying around the Rishoyim. Oy ba'im, if by the Kohen Gadol is the dad of Nishma Kele, the Kohen Gadol has no tumult. Will nit Kele sein in seine avoida, doesn't want to include in his avoida. Or die Yidden, welche seien in Beginnes Shule Hamil, the Jews who are considered fringe, the lowest levels. A viele von das is der Vater, was will halten by the Heche der Darge von Kel Mamadaka. And his reasoning may be because he wants to serve Hashem in a deeper and a quieter avoida. Wer boto Rachmana letzlan sein Metzias mit seiner avoida. He dies. And the Rebbe says, what does Misa mean? That his Metzias is bottle. Why? If you don't include in your avodah the Yidden who make noise, then there's a Velei Yomis. While the Shleimus from Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people only whole, is totally in the Aveda was Nemta Rum, al Shishim Ribim Yisrael. It must include all 600,000 Jews. From the Sheichem Shiftechem, from the heads, B'Sheyev Cheitev Etzecha V'Sheyev Mecha, the lowest Jews. Every Jew is included. Verstehst? So the Rebbe gave us an insight into the bells.
Why you need noise?
The dafka have to have noise. It's beferish chitzonius. It's beferish peilish. Why? Because you have to include Yidden that the whole Avodas Hashem is mitatum. And the Rebbe continues, let's read Sif Hey now. Das is aber nor by the Avodah of Kohen Gadol b'meshech halashon. It's only a whole year. When Knisasi and Avedasi is not in Kodesh, when he goes into the regular Kodesh, Dort is Feran Anort, for the Chilukei Dargis for Yidden, at that point there's still differences between one kind of a Jew and another kind of a Jew. For Nashechem, Sheftechem, Bezcheite, Vezecha, Shevmecha, the heads are obviously different than the water carriers and the wood choppers. When the fathers, Venishmas is Berash, the tumul represents those Yidden who are called Shilayim, the fringes, the Rishoyim, the Bali Chub, the Beinin.
You explain again why the Malchut was the ones that he dies?
The Nekuda is that a tzaddik runs to Hashem. The Rasha, the Baal Tshuva, runs from Averis. And running from Averis is like running from death. It doesn't look pretty. The psychology of it is when you have the Ra inside of you. Yidden left Mitzrayim, so they ran away. Mashiach comes, the tiny Perek Lamed Av, we're not going to run. Why? When the Ra is inside of you, you're running away from the Ra inside of you. And it comes out in the tumult. When there's no Ra inside of you, you go slow. Verstehst? Ma she'enke davede von Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur Mekedesh HaKadosh, when it comes to Yom Kippur, and the Kohen Gadol goes to the Holy of Holies, is on Arash. Then the Kohen Gadol has no bells, no fringes, no noise. Valdemods on an Al Yidden Kamalachim, Jews are like angels, and they're all equal. The Isgalos from the Iskachos Atmos from Al Yidden mit Nebishne reveals the connection with Yidden Hashem on a level called Etzem. Uvibal das jeder Yid. All of us are feel the vazayin to shule amil, even if our whole year they're considered the fringes of the Meil. But on Yom Kippur there's a revelation of the Atzmos von Hayidin. Stay in dan betachas akiru va'isachtas b'dalakus. They're as close to God as possible. They're one with God as possible. Yechid Yachtach is eich zeir knisa l'kedesh hakadosh, when they go into the Holy of Holies, as represented by the personality of the Kohen Gadol. Nita vi rocha knasa karv. It's not like a Baal Tshuva, someone who's far became close. Because then you have to have Rash, now Tachas Abitl killed Mamadak. So a whole year, if you don't have bells, you have Misa, and the bells represented the Kohen Gadol is carrying the so-called not Jews into the Beis HaMikdash. Yom Kippur, we're all in that Madrega. Okay? Now, wasn't that sweet? It was a simple word, it was a very sweet night word. It was a very, very sweet night word. Right, because right. Maybe you missed the bracket. I read the bracket.
I know, we talk about people that make noise in shul. I guess that's had to talk to the shul.
That's a mitzvah to talk in shul.
But
The Telt HaMaisa mit Chol der Altem, Telt HaMaisa. That the never had noise gerufen von Shredden in shul. And then all of a sudden they were tzaddis. Because in shul people used to come and they would report to Tutzak Bam Shochen and people used to help each other. So the Bechol Nevler got up in shul, geklappt in Tisch and gesagt, we can't reden in shul weiter. It's interesting, I just discovered something very, very fascinating. You know Rashag and Mechol Taram on the same yard site? Isn't that mind-blowing? The Rashag passed away Vav Adar. Rishon Mechol passed away also Vav Adar. So I went to, what's it called? Encyclopedia, whatever they were online, Wikipedia. Or Jukipedia, whatever it is. Mechol Teitelbaum was named after Mechol der Alter.
Who?
Lubavitch was a mashpia.
Oh.
His name is Mechol Bliner, Mechol Nevle, Mechol der Alter. He passed away in 1910, Tofrei Shayin, Eter. When he passed away, the Rebbe Rayatz carried his Orden till the Beis HaChaim. He was an Adam Gadol, he was a Chassid for Tzemach Tzedek, he was a Malamed. And when the Rebbe made Temchat Mimim, he brought him to Lubavitch to be mashpia. But he Lachatchila came old, and within a few years he was useless. He was just like altered. So they wanted the kantor, or the person who was in charge of the office, wanted to take him off the payroll. What was the guy's name? I was someplace out of town, and I met a Jew who's a direct descendant of the bookkeeper in Temchat Mimim. It didn't sound. So they wanted to fire Bechol der Alter, and Rebbe Rashab said no. He said, but he's not doing anything. He says, no, the Baruch look at him, it's plenty. Bechol der Alter. Bechol Teitelbaum, even a nomenech. Zechenia levracha. He's if you talk about a Jew in our times who was be'emes, real. You can't find realer than Bechol Teitelbaum. Mamish yochad b'minei. Mamish Bechol Teitelbaum. You know, when Mendel tells the story how Yene Paltavet and Gezogt is a simin amesiris nefesh. You know the story. Mendel was on a train to leave Russia, and Yene says a simin amesiris nefesh to take a and Mendel got off the train, and then he spent all those years in Siberia. And Yene Khan was killed. Al Kiddush Hashem. The whole Teitelbaum lived that way, but pale, to the day he died. Mesiris nefesh has no agbola. There was nobody. Bechol Teitelbaum was a yachid, and he took up no space. You know, he wasn't even bittel. He wasn't even bittel. He wasn't even Bechol Teitelbaum. He was such a Adam Gadol. He was such a big chas.
When what's it called? Lerman. Mendel Lerman?
Yeah.
He used to go to the office years back, and he couldn't walk. He used to crawl up the steps.
Bechol.
I remember he couldn't do the steps. He crawled up the steps to come upstairs.
Yeah.
Son, do you remember? Am I right?
What, to ask for a donation?
Yeah.
Wow. He passed away Samachay. So Berel Lipsker said to me that the same number of years that Rashag had Temchat Mimim in America, that's how many years Bechol had Ol Teira. He died exactly the same number of years after Rashag, meaning Rashag started Temchat Mimim in Tafshin. He started Ol Teira in Tafshin Tezayin, so he had it for 49 years, and he had it 49 years, but at the same yard site. The same yard site. Vav Adar. You remember we went to his Levaya. He came in for the Levaya. He died on Shabbos. Rashag died on Shabbos. Levaya was Sunday. Okay, go back to the beginning now, Rabbi says. Go back to the beginning. The Sicha is so we learned the heart of the Sicha, the Biyoresis, about the Pamoinim. Now the Rebbe goes back. The Sicha is about a Rashi and a Ramban. That's what the Sicha is about, okay? Now we're not going to spend time on the questions, we're going to spend time on the answers, but let's read from the beginning. Regarding the Meil, Zog the Pasuk says, Vasis al Shulov, you put on the fringes, Rimoine, that means pomegranates, Tcheles, Argomer, Telashani, which is three different types of wool. One is Tcheles. Tcheles actually says is Yorok. Yorok really means green, it doesn't mean blue. And Argomer is purple, and Telashani is red. Argoman, Rashi says, Tseva Sheshmoy Argoman. He doesn't tell you what it is. Tcheles tells you it's Yorok. Tcheles means blue, but Yorok means aquamarine. So that's a bluish green. It's a bluish green, yeah? Aqua, but the person is Yorok. Yorok is a funny word. You know why? Yorok includes green and yellow. The same word. Yorok means yellow and green.
Oh, same word.
Yeah. Upamein is all betech. And between the pomegranates there was gold glekalach, gold bells. It's Rashi mefarish. As chochtiri moinim zane givena gulim v'chalulim, even though the pomegranates were round and hollow, is over the pshat from Pamein is over teicham when it says that the golden glekalach, the golden bells, were inside. So Rashi says nicht as die pamoinim haben sich gefunden in dem cholol von den moinim. It doesn't mean that they put the bells inside the hollow of the wool pomegranates, nor beineim, between them. Saviv bein shnei moini pamen echadav v'tal shalomil. There was pomeverim and pomerim. There was a pomegranate without a bell, then a bell, then a pomegranate without a bell, then a bell. That's what Rashi holds. Again, somebody showing him hold that there were 72 right? 36 and 36, that there was just pomegranates, and each pomegranate had a bell inside, but the Rashi holds they were intermittent. A pomegranate, the bell, they were extended along the bottom of the dates. Frag the Ramban. Leit Rashi's pshat kumteis, according to Rashi, as lehayu what Amim Shamshim Klum, that the pomegranates were hollow and empty in certain of a purpose. Un Abe is an blaze lenoi, says the Ramban, if these pomegranates were just to be pretty, lama hayu asuyim kirimenim chalulim yasem kibin tapuchizah. Why make them like pomegranates? Make them like apples, like golden delicious apples. That's a weird kasha. Ramban says, why if they're hollow anyway, don't make pomegranates, make apples. Zog der Ram, and for the Ram.
It's more kosher. It's one of the Chameshes.
Yeah, and for the Ram.
It's so difficult to roll into specifics, right? And it's so slightly different, right?
In other words, Belaz, Belosh Medina, who cares? It might have come in. The Ram doesn't understand the Ramban's kasha. What's the difference? It's a fruit. Now, we're not going to read the kashas further. We're going straight to the terutzim. Now, let's just reassert it. I'm just going to restate it. Instead of it being a kasha, it's a statement of fact. Rashi holds that it makes sense that the Shuli Hamil had bells and pomegranates. The Ramban agrees that there were bells and pomegranates, but he thinks it should have been apples. So now, Itlepel was pomegranates, but the Ramban holds it should have been apples. Rashi says no, it was pomegranates. It should be pomegranates. So what is their theoretical nafkamina? Lepel, we know what it was. So the Rebbe says, in order to answer the question about whether pomegranates are preferred or apples are preferred, you have to give the hakdama of the glekalach, of the bells, that they made noise. And the making noise means that you're stepping along every kind of Jew. And Yom Kippur, it was quiet because we're all on the highest madregas and so on. Once you understand that, the machlekes Rashi and Ramban becomes very clear. Go to Sif Vav, page 339. No, it should be apples. Yeah. No, dafka apples. You'll see in a minute. You'll see in a minute. Says the Likutei Api Kalanal, based on the whole conversation about the bells, v'nishma koilin, wird sein verstandig der Chilik zwischen Shitas Haramban. The Ramban holds im lenoi yasik mit the The only reason for these pomegranates was for beauty. Don't make them from pomegranates, make them from apples. Page 339, Sivvav, 339, Sivvav. Yeah? Apikala now wird man verstehen the Chilik zwischen Shitas Ramban. The Ramban holds that the reason for the pomegranates was for beauty, make them apples. Und Shitas Rashi, as in the fall sein der Meil Menoin, Taka, they were for beauty, but they were dafke lenoi, they were made from Rimoina. By the way, one of the things that the Rebbe brings in the Sichos is that the Menoira had kaftoirim, had buttons. And Rashi says, Kimin tapuchim. So the Rebbe says that Ramban is going to say, the Lishitasi is going to be, the whole purpose for the decorations of the Menorah was for beauty. So just like in the Menorah, the kafterim were Kimin tapuchim, over here should also be Kimin tapuchim. Why is it Kimin rimein if it's lino? So the Rebbe says like this, listen, in one sentence you're going to right away say, aha. Eden seine geglichen zu Tapuch, side to Tapuch and side to Remain. We compared both to an apple and to a pomegranate. What's the difference? The chilik is, zwischen sie is, the dimming from Tapuch is matim zu Yidden with seine beruma Maila. Jews being compared to apples is Gan Eden. Like Rashi says by Yitzchak Avinu that they came in with the reich, b'ni reich, sod Hashem, says Rashi, reich from state Tapuchim. Apples is Gan Eden. Und beginas Riemen, the pomegranates, bescheiches zu Yidden, was sie gewinnen sich beschwellamat. When Yidden on the lowest madrega, they're compared to Rimonim. Like it says in the Pasuk, Kepelach HaKam Harim Reikoscha, the Gemara says, Reikonim Shebach are also Malay Mitzvahs Kerimen. Aber Eich Zei, sein ungefüllt mit Teva Kedusha, even Jews who are madrega, but pomegranates are full of Kedusha, wie the Hemshech was seen from the Maimer Azal, feel the Kom Shebach. So what's the Machlekes? What do they represent? The Ramban says Tapuchim represent the best Jews. And the Rashi says they represent the same thing that the Glekalach represented.
So,
Shule HaMeil.
so knock is the Kohen Gadol going into the Kodesh HaKodashim, and according to Rashi, it's the Bali Tshuva with the...
Okay, let the Rebbe do the talking, but that's the close of art. Rashi holds everything b'shulei hameil was representative of Balei Tshuva. So the bells made noise and the fruits were reminding. The Ramban says, excuse me, it's for beauty. Which Jews are beautiful? Balei Tshuva. Tzaddikim are beautiful. Rashi says the beauty of the Jewish people is the Balei Tshuva. And the Ramban says, excuse me, let's read. In Pirush Rashi, Pshute shall make. Rashi says, Pshat. Wo Yidden werden gesehen, wie sie seien bepashtes bechetenes, Yidden as they are bepashtes. Zet men the Yidden shebeshulem. You look at the Jews who are sitting at the fringe of the Meil, in a darge von the economy, they're on a low level. The ribat gedav zayin dafke remainim. The fruit were pomegranates representing the lowest kinds of Jews. So advising to show, as oyer di economy, even the empty Jews skipped the bracket. Zayin arayin mitten kein Gadol al Hakedesh. They went into the Beis Hamikdash. Zay zayin atel von Klal Yisrael. They're port of Klal Yisrael, Malay and mitzvahs kirimin. Otherwise, the kein Gadol dies, and that's the yofi of the Jewish people. Next paragraph. In Pirush Ramban, Mashenk in the Ramban, wo seinen do nit nor pshot. The Ramban writes in the Pirush Al-Teira that in his Pirush this Kabbalah, Devarim the Imam the Yedechein. It's the weirdest thing in the world. The Ramban writes in the beginning of a Sefer, I'm going to write in Yom Api Kabbalah, but you're not going to understand. Don't even try because you're wasting your time. But he wrote him. Why write him if you write that no one's going to understand? The Kashaf HaMaiseh, but this Kabbalah is dort mudgish the pnimius von Yidden. So the Ramban, since the Ramban has also said this, he explains about the pnimius of Yidden. Was mitzaden haben Yid ken shayches nicht zu chet. The Ramban holds that the beauty of the Jewish people is not connected to Aved, is Amechom Tzadikim. And that's the machlokes. Rashi says Shulei Hamil is Balei Tshuva. And that's the beauty of the Jewish people. The Ramban, who's a Makubal, sees Shulei Hamil as Yofi, and Yofi is Tzadikim. And that's why, in the bracket, that Ramban holds that the bells were knocking on the door, like you said. Like you said, the tzaddik knocks on the door before he enters. That was the bell. Skip the bracket. Und das ist die Kasha. This is Ramban's Kasha. If the fruit are made for the beauty, make them fruit that represent real beauty, which is apples. If the pomegranates not for a purpose. Nor if is bringing the Shenkai. The Meil from Bnei Yisrael, no, the beauty of the Jewish people. Don't emphasize the advantage of a pomegranate, which shows on the lowest Jews, nor them Ili von Yidden mitzat Pimiusim, the highest Meil of Yidden, that every Jew is an apple. And the Rebbe said, the Meneda was either Zion, there's a Meramis of Zion, Hashem, and it was Kimin Tapuchim, instead of Council base, because in the Meneda, all Jews were Tzaddik. So they're basically arguing about what is the beauty of the Jewish people. Rashi says the beauty of the Jewish people is by the tshuva, that's Pshat. And the Rabban said the beauty of the Jewish people is apples, and the whole reason for the Rimainim was for Yofi, make apples. Beautiful, gorgeous. And they therefore argue what the bells are for. Rashi holds the bells represent the Balei Tshuva. And the Ramban holds the bells as the Kohen Gadol announcing himself because he's serving Hashem. Even though simply and superficially. Is Aved in even for Nishma Koila, you have to hear the Kohen Gadol's voice. Need to get from the Aved at a lower level than serving Hashem quietly. Afal Pikain, on the other hand, is Do in ear. In the Aved the Barash, a Yid who's on a lower level. And therefore, Aved has a big tumul. A Meil legabe, the Aved the Bebittel has an advantage over the Aved the Bebittel. What's the Meile? That you go on Gari limitations. The Aved von Keld Mamadako is Mitahakbal. If you serve Hashem with a deep, quiet depth, it's Taka every Meile, but it's Eidus Bekelim. Emes the Aved state Taka mit the Bittel, the Aved in the state of Bittel, Talazachen, but it's Eid Bekelim with Ais Yashvus. Mashenk and David if a Nishma Koiloi or Yidu makes noise. What does it mean making noise? He's going out of his own kelim. If the Rash Godel Gufa Bavais, the noise is proof. As there's a rise from the Akbalas from kelim, but we don't have all limitations from kelim. Can nit magbal sein die spoilers. He can't limit his excitement and his reaction. When the Riber kommt rise and a type of a keli screams. Und das ist eine Tap of 341 von the time him. One of the reasons was the reason we say that where Baal Tshuva stands, the Tzaddik Gomer doesn't stand or cannot stand like the Rambam says. Tzaddik Gomer Michael Lamed Bey Val Davke in the Mirash Fun of Avodas Tshuva, the tomb of Avodas Tshuva, you have the believer from the Neshama. So Rashi says the beauty of the Jewish people is the Baal Tshuva and their noise, and the Ramban says the Jewish people is the apple of their quiescence. And then the Rebbe goes on to speak about the idea that it's not enough to do tshuva, kiruv, and to be makar of Yidden, but you gotta make noise. It's America. Medaf, machen tumul. You gotta make tumul. Okay, questions or comments?
It says over here in Rashi, Rimone Abulu v'Chalulum Hayu Kamin Rimonim Hasuyim Kibelis Beis Tanagodos. You know what that means?
They're shaped like an egg of a bird.
Are they? Rimonim. So he says over here in this Rashi Kipshutei Rimonim Korakos Rimonim L'Fisha Agulum Halulum Hayu V'Nidim K'Vir V'Nor Asim Kibelis Tanagodos Rimonim Shalai Nidbar B'Shua עדיין לא נפתחה כליפסון שאין מעגול לגמרי אלא מלוח קצת כמו זה.
It's the top crown.
And it's also
It hasn't opened.
elongated. It's a little over.
It's not
So
plump
now
yet.
it's that why the Ramban says
They're not pretty.
tapuchim.
They're not pretty.
That's why he doesn't want to see that. We say what's the difference between tapuchim? Well, it's the same. He says no, they look, they have different shapes.
Very good. Nice, hard. This was a good sikh. And everybody understood.